Good morning. This is day 205 of Ukrainian resistance. This is Mediacentru Ukraine. My name is Vasyl Samokhvalov. Today our guest is Ivan Krulko, member of Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, first deputy chair of the Committee on Budget. Good morning. Good morning, Vasyl. Happy to see all the spectators of your informational marathon. Glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes. We will be talking about the budget for 2023. It was presented as the project, as a draft. So could you focus on 3-4 important things that an average Ukrainian should know about the budget? I will be honest with you. This budget is probably the most challenging of all. I mean, budget 2023. I haven't ever experienced a more challenging budget in my work in the parliament. I probably won't even be talking about the norms of the budget code that it doesn't meet. But we have to say that Ukraine is currently fighting the war, and the budget couldn't be less challenging. It could be different, but the Cabinet of Ministers submitted this budget to the Parliament. I'm just going to mention a few figures and facts so that our viewers understand what we are talking about. There will be the deficit of 20% of the GDP, 1.27 trillion hryvnias. So we have never had such budget deficit in our history of independent Ukraine. That means that the expenditure differs from the revenue. So the difference between expenditure and revenue is almost half. So the revenue is 1.28 trillion hryvnias and expenditure is 2.5 trillion hryvnias. What does that mean? It means that half of the budget needs to be borrowed and only half of the budget, so that will be own revenue. So thanks to the taxpayers' money. That means that the threshold of the deficit increases and the state loan increases. The state loan will be 100% to GDP according to the plans of the Cabinet of Ministers that submitted this budget. What can we talk right now for sure? Without international aid, 2023 for Ukraine will be impossible to cover and to live independently. So, and we won't be able to cover all the items of our budget. Now, speaking about the indicators that relate to each and every Ukrainian, things we have to understand, things that the Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Finance, and the Cabinet of Ministers have included. Inflation of consumer prices will be 30%. What does that mean for an average Ukrainian? It means that food, essentials, will cost more, significantly more. Unfortunately, Ukrainians have to be prepared, have to understand this. Unemployment figures will go up. 2021, we projected unemployment figures for 2022 as 8% growth. Now, it's going to be 28% growth unemployment rate. I believe that this is incredibly serious situation. It means that the level of life is going to drop and it will be very, very challenging. Yes, we need to fight this war. We need to win the war. We have to kick our enemy out of our territory. We have to rebuild Ukraine. But speaking of facts and figures that we anticipate in 2023, so they are really disturbing and alarming. Speaking of the programs we are going to implement next year, all programs have been cut down besides one. So this is expenditure on security and defense, which will increase. Speaking of a percentage ratio to GDP, so the expenditure on defense will raise by 17%. Ukrainian security will be probably the best funded worldwide from the budget, I mean. So more than 50% of all budget costs will be used for defense and the armed forces. I will be very honest with you. It's very logical because our armed forces, provided they are funded well and they are capable of protecting us, defending us, and winning this war, then we will win. Everybody wins. If we do not fund defense and security, so we won't win this war. So this is the truth. And this has to be taken into account into the budget. But taking into account the inflation that we see right now and inflation that we project for the next year, and taking into account the cost of living and the level of life that is going to drop. So I believe that we also need to take care of social standards. But unfortunately, the budget does not anticipate any growth in social security. So neither pensions nor subsidies, no other payments, so they will not be raised. Cost of living will be the same as in 2022, minimum wage same as in 2022. So basically, social component will not be decreased, but it will not be increased either. So there won't be any subsidies in the budget. So everything stays at the level of 2022. So these were the main indicators that I had to voice. Maybe you have questions. Speaking of social payments and other pressing needs of Ukrainian population, do you think the budget will change? Because now it's a draft budget and it will be voted and it will become a law. Do you think it will be amended? It will be modified? According to budget code, after the project is registered, it takes 10 days for the members of parliament to submit any amendments and proposals and modify it. Of course, they will be submitted by Batькivshchina party that I belong to. They will be substantiated, they will be justified. I believe that other members of parliament will also contribute to this process and this work. But whether it will be taken into account, we will see. I have a feeling deep down that most likely the government wants this budget to be supported, to be voted for the way it is. Maybe not 100% the way it is, but close to it. So I don't think that they will come up with anything new and any proposals that will include additional expenses. I believe that they will show how much deficit we have in the budget, which is 20% of our GDP. The deficit in the past years was no more than 3%. This year it's 20%. I doubt that any proposals of the members of parliament will be taken down well. We will try maybe to fight for social standards, for the programs related to IDPs, things that we need to do to help people survive in this challenging time. But we definitely will be substantiating such proposals and we will try to improve this budget somehow and thus the condition of Ukrainian citizens. Can we enlarge the revenue part of the budget? It can be done in two ways. The first way, provided the economics works and people pay taxes. In order for the economics to be functional, so the government has to work to support Ukrainian business, Ukrainian entrepreneurs. Such programs had to be part of the budget. There are some, but they are minuscule. Therefore, we need to stimulate economics because this is our taxes. Second, probably need to stop doing things that they started doing recently, because I have a feeling that the war is over in Ukraine. Some law enforcement start putting pressure on business, absolutely ungrounded pressure. So, and it has nothing to do with entrepreneurship. It rather stimulates the business to close down and leave Ukraine. I know that there were such instances because people approached me as a member of parliament, and I voiced it in the government, and I talked to law enforcement that stop putting pressure on business, let business survive, let business provide jobs and pay taxes. Second way how we can increase the revenue part, we need to continue working with international organizations, institutions, with the big banks, international banks, with our partner states who do not offer us credits but grants, and that will also help, because we all understand that Ukraine is not only fighting for itself, but through this defense, reckless defense, we protect the whole Europe from Russia and from the new world war, which is at the threshold, because we understand that Putin acts like Hitler. So he's no different than Hitler. So after Ukraine, he's going to move forward. But it looks he's not right now, because Ukraine is going to be the nail that is going to be hammered in his coffin. And it will return Ukraine back to the normal life. So we have hope that that international partners will help us cover this budget deficit and will help us replenish the revenue part of our budget. I'll give you a simple example, Vasil. For example, some countries that are EU members, in particular Baltic states, they had a separate item in their budget. So this is EU assistance. So that was part of their revenue part of the budget. And when I was learning the peculiarities of the state budget of Lithuania, I was in Vilnius, I took time to learn it in details. So approximately 4 billion euros was allocated to the country, whose population is slightly more than 3 million people, but we have 40 million people in our country. If we received such assistance from EU in our budget, taking into account that we are the candidate to EU accession. So I believe that a lot of issues could be resolved, and social standards could be raised, pensions, payments to IDPs, especially taking into account inflation, growing prices, and the loss of jobs. And we have the figures that we know from Greece, when Greece was saved from default, and how much money was poured into their economy. What is the probability that the money printing machine of the National Bank will be put in operation soon? It has already been put in operation. 50 billion hryvnias of securities, military securities, was purchased recently. So it was only possible by putting this machine in operation, and this money replenished the budget, and now we are funding other articles, other needs. So it works, but this process has to be controlled, because we understand that there were precedents that this measure can launch inflation processes which will be impossible to stop. And my very last question: people see economics through certain indicators such as prices, inflation, and exchange rate of euro, hryvnia, and dollar. So what are the anticipations? So 42.2, that's going to be average annual rate. By the end of the year, it will be 50 hryvnias for $1, but 42.2, so this is a forecasted rate to calculate the expenditure and revenue of the budget. Thank you very much, Ivan, for detailed information about budget for 2023, priorities and challenges. We are expecting to see it soon after it is voted for in Verkhovna Rada. So we are going to have Natalia Humaniuk at 11:30. She is the head of United Coordinating Press Center of Security and Defense Forces in the south of Ukraine. We will be talking about operational situation